Good morning friends and welcome back to NPTEL online certification course on public speaking. In the previous lecture, we touched upon the forms and stages of public speaking and we got acquainted with small acts of speech. We also talked about the history of public speaking, and we also could understand how public speaking has its roots in religion, in literature and also in history. In this lecture of today, we shall try our level best to throw light on some acts of speech which can help an individual in becoming a successful public speaker. My dear friends, both in life as well as in public speaking, we come across different situations and we also are exposed to different sorts of people who in public speaking can be considered to be as audience members. How such situations create in us a desire to address a larger gathering in public, we shall try to have some of the ways through which we can get our learners exposed to these realities. So, while we have touched upon some of them in the first part of this lecture, in the second part of the forms and stages in public speaking, we shall actually try to explore all these things. But before I begin, let me make a mention of a very beautiful quote by William Shakespeare, one of the giants of English literature, who says, "All the world is a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 edges." So, while Shakespeare talks about the 7 edges of man, I am actually trying to focus on the several roles that we can also play or we have to play while we are in life as well as in public speaking. Now, all sorts of public speaking actually begin, of course, when we are little or small children, we go to our schools and the first stage begins with that. Of course, when we are exposed to public speaking, but then there are other stages also, and these stages have actually been a site of persuasion, a site of convincing, a site of learning. As we could see in the previous lecture, that since ancient times, stages were only platforms of instructions wrapped in entertainment. You might have realized how in the previous lecture, while we were talking about mystery, miracle and morality plays, we could see how stage was important. And since we did not have that such an infrastructure which we have today, the stage used to be on a wagon, and the wagon had wheels, and it used to be transported from one corner of the city to another, and depending upon the feasibility as well as the visibility, people could also see several plays. So, through this medium of entertainment, of course, at that time it was the only way of entertainment, but later on things improved, and today we have a different sort of facility when we can go to theaters, when we can go to halls, when we can have movies, even when we can watch movies and plays sitting at our home, fine, at leisure and pleasure as well. But then through these mediums of entertainment, the intended message used actually to reach the people, the audience. You can see here on the right hand side, here we have a stage, and on this stage some performance will be there, and that performance also we can consider as a sort of public speaking. My dear friends, public speaking in fact is a sort of public dealing. You actually deal with people. And today we are going to talk about several such acts of speech which may not exactly be the public speaking, but then they are in a way going to prepare you to speak in public. What are these? And in this regard, as in the previous lecture, we simply gave a brief introduction to the plays, and we could also see that dramas used to be one of the modes of public speaking, where people had to play different roles and where they could realize how to respond, how to react, and how to speak with different people on different occasions. Now, here we shall be talking about several types of dramatic speeches. Now, when somebody watches a play, one actually not only looks at the actor, but also tries to imitate the way actors speak, because they are provided with the training, fine. And as school children, you also might have been exposed to several recitations, poetry recitations, then several declamation contests and all. That actually used to be one way to prepare you to the outside world, where you also have to play different roles as a public speaker. So, here we shall talk about these four things, the first being a sort of soliloquy, then monologue, then aside, then dialogue. All these may remind those people who are acquainted with drama, so they may be reminded of plays, but especially for those people who are actually trying to become prosperous speakers in the days to come, they can through these learn how to speak in different ways, through different people, and with different ways of dialogue or exchange. So, the very first thing is soliloquy. Now, what is soliloquy and how does it help? If we can provide a definition of soliloquy, soliloquy comes from the word solo, solo, as all of us know, solo actually means one, and loquy comes from loquacity, loquacis. So, when one man speaks, that is soliloquy, but then one man can speak on majority of occasions, but when we talk about soliloquy, it is actually a long, usually serious, spoken discourse that a character in a play delivers to an audience. You will often find in some of the plays, if you are actually a lover of plays, you will find that there are some characters who give a long speech which can be considered to be a sort of soliloquy. And this soliloquy is given to an audience, and that actually through that soliloquy, what is actually the aim? The aim is that the speaker, the character or the actor reveals the character's thoughts. So, through soliloquy, which is actually a long speech, usually serious, you will find that during your school days, you might have been given several soliloquies to practice. That used to be a practice in terms of your pronunciation, in terms of your language, in terms of your flow. So, it is actually a literary device, and the purpose of a soliloquy is to channel the inner thoughts and feelings of character for the audience. Sometimes or the other, you will find even when the soliloquy is long, the actors who are going to speak that soliloquy, they are trained as to when they should stop, when they should take a break, when they should be fast. Is it not one beautiful way to learn the nuances of public speaking, my dear friends? Yes, of course. And that is why I am trying to expose you to these small but beautiful and interesting acts of speech. So, this soliloquy provides insight into a character's emotions and reflections. When we shall be talking about the non-verbals, there we will learn how when a speaker speaks, his face has got certain expressions. So, through soliloquy also a character or a speaker reflects a sort of emotion, because whatever a person speaks, it is actually reflected on his face through a sort of emotion, through a sort of vestige, through a sort of reflection on the face. Fine. So, emotions and then reflections. Emotions at times can be of an angry person. It can also be at times of a serious person. It can also be at times of a sad person who is withdrawn, who feels himself neglected. Fine. One can be reminded of several beautiful soliloquies from Shakespeare. Fine. When he says, brief, brief, out candle, life is but a walking shadow. A poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. Fine. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So, life is but a walking shadow. Now, there can be quite a good number of examples of soliloquy, not only in plays, but also you can find both in big plays, especially since I was mentioning Shakespeare, and here you can find one of the beautiful and one of the most exemplary soliloquies, which was actually delivered by none other than Hamlet. And the moment we talk about or mention the name of Hamlet, most of us actually create a different sort of picture. A person who is actually sandwiched between the two, a person who is indecisive, a person who is not certain. And you look at the wordings of this soliloquy and how through learning from this soliloquy one can have a better command over language. The way Hamlet says, because Hamlet is in a very precarious condition. Hamlet comes to know that his father has been killed by none other than his uncle, and his mother has eloped with the uncle, and now they are the king and the queens. But Hamlet is burning with a revengeful desire, but then some way or the other in his mind he is not certain, and that is why he says, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say, we end the heart ache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is here to. It is a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there is the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have suffered of this mortal coil must give us pause. So, very beautiful soliloquy, and in this soliloquy you can find a beautiful combination of words and the action and the mental state which you can anticipate might be there reflected on the face of Hamlet, who is in a very decisive state of mind. So, soliloquies help an individual to have a grasp over the way things are uttered, spoken, and the way emotions are reflected on the face. But this is actually a practice ground for those speakers who are actually lying in wait when their turn comes, and then they will perhaps, with a lot of preparation, they will appear before the crowd and will create a sort of ecstasy with their ecstatic speech. Another important act of speech is monologue. You might be thinking that soliloquies and monologue can be the one, but there is a little bit of difference. Mono means one, single, and log comes from dialogue. You know, everywhere there is log means language. So, mono, speech. Monologue, the word which is derived from the Greek monos, which means single, and legein, which means to speak, is a speech given by a single person to an audience. In this regard, most of the speeches that you come across, they will appear to you as a sort of monologue. Another definition that Encyclopedia Britannica gives, monologue in literature and drama is an extended speech by one person. The term has several closely related meanings. In this regard, students of literature who are actually acquainted with dramatic monologue, and they might be reminded of several dramatic monologues, and in this regard the very beautiful name of Robert Browning, a Victorian poet, comes to my mind. Fine. So when somebody gives a monologue, maybe the audience is not there. The audience may be hidden because you do not see the audience there, but then the speaker, the narrator, speaks, and he speaks in such a manner that it becomes very dramatic, and there is an effect. So a dramatic monologue is any speech of some duration addressed by a character to a second person. And the second person is there, but then while the entire narration goes on, the second person does not intervene. Fine? So I'm reminded of Robert Browning, where in one of the famous dramatic monologues he says, "This is my last Duchess painted on the wall." Fine? So he tells the other person that here is my last Duchess painted on the wall. And you know why he says this? Because the other person had come to pop the question of this duke's marriage. But then the duke had an erstwhile wife who is no more, and then this speaker tells about his last duchess. As the lines of the poem go further, then at one place the speaker says, "Oh sir, she smiled, no doubt, but who did not pass without much this smile? And one day I gave commands, and all the smiles stopped together." So by saying all this, not only does the speaker reveal his mind, rather the speaker also tells what he did to his earlier duchess. So we have so many dramatic monologues. We can again take one example of monologue. At this time it is from Romeo and Juliet. This is actually a scene where through the windows Romeo has a look at Juliet, and there goes this monologue. "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun." Very beautiful comparison. So Romeo compares Juliet with the sun. "Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon." So the moon is full of envy. Why don't you come and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art more fair than she. The reference is to Juliet, that you are more beautiful, but not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses, I will answer it. Nobody is listening. But as this comes to an end, suddenly Juliet actually hears it. But as the drama proceeds, it so happens that Juliet actually, there is one character named Friar who helps Juliet by providing a sleeping draught, because the family members wanted Juliet to marry another person, and Friar comes to the aid and provides a sleeping draught so that Juliet may take it and pose as if she were dead. And you know what happens later? The Friar's message, and this message the Friar wanted to give to Romeo, but the message does not reach Romeo, and Romeo is actually told by his own servant that Juliet is dead. So when he comes to see Juliet, by that time what happens? Romeo, because he thought that his love was now a sort of failure, he buys poison from the apothecary and then dies. Romeo kills Paris, the other person who wanted to marry Juliet, and later takes poison and dies. Learning from Friar about the incident, Juliet also stabs herself. So the love actually ends in a sort of disappointment, dejection. It ends in a sort of failure. But then the sort of monologue which was uttered by Romeo, actually tells us the way he was head over heels in love with Juliet. Now, as I was talking about dramatic monologue and I had mentioned Robert Browning, we can take some lines from Robert Browning's another dramatic monologue entitled Porphyria's Lover. And you know, this also tells us about the narrator or the speaker's bent of mind. The speaker was actually waiting. The speaker was a lover and was waiting for his own beloved, Porphyria. And Porphyria got delayed. And the poem starts with the rain and the evening and the night, and Porphyria actually came delayed. But when Porphyria came, this man, this narrator, this speaker actually had a different sort of mind, because he wanted to take the lady in his own embrace. And the way he actually got hold of it, he caught the lady in such a manner, and that is actually the description that he finally narrates in the form of a dramatic monologue. You can have a look at the lines and then can understand and derive the meaning. Be sure I looked up at her eyes. This is the speaker. Be sure I looked up at her eyes, happy and proud. At last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. Surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew. While I debated what to do, that moment she was mine, mine, fair. So an air of possession. He actually wanted to possess Porphyria and wanted to tell the outside world that Portia was his and not others, perfectly pure and good. I found a thing to do, and suddenly my mind changed. I found a thing to do, and all her hair in one long yellow string I wound 3 times her little throat around. With the help of the cascade of Porphyria's hair, I wound 3 times her little throat around and strangled her, and I killed her. No pain felt she, I am quite sure she felt no pain. So this is how this speaker, who is actually obsessed in love with Porphyria, this is how he speaks this dialogue. And here we can find the mentality, the mindset, the reflected emotions on his face, the way he narrates, and you can find how the words have been plucked in a very candid manner, but then the words are different, whereas the action that the person creates is actually going to be very miserable, and Porphyria, my dear friends, is killed. Now, again, because we are talking about these monologues, and as I told you that these monologues can also later be a sort of speech, and through several dramatic speeches that we have been referring to, here comes to my mind that if I take some of the lines of a beautiful inaugural speech made by Barack Obama, one of the former presidents of USA, you see how he starts and how he ends. I'll read only the starting lines and the ending lines. My fellow citizens, I stand here today, humbled by the task before us, grateful for the trust you have bestowed, mindful of the sacrifices borne by our ancestors. I thank President Bush for his service to our nation, as well as the generosity and cooperation he has shown throughout this transition. 44 Americans have now taken the presidential oath, and he is actually going to be the 45th. The words have been spoken during rising tides of prosperity and the still waters of peace. So, and the speech follows, and then he says, at these moments, America has carried on not simply because of the skill or vision of those in high office, but because we, the people, have remained faithful to the ideals of our forebearers and true to our founding documents. And the speech goes on. And I am going to take the last thread of his inaugural address. In reaffirming the greatness of our nation, we understand that greatness is never a given. It must be earned. Our journey has never been one of shortcuts or settling for less. It has not been the path for the faint-hearted, for those who prefer leisure over work or seek only the pleasures of riches and fame. Rather, it has been the risk-takers, the doers, the makers of things, some celebrated but more often men and women obscure in their labor, who have carried us up the long rugged path towards prosperity and freedom. My dear friends, did you not find the beautiful choice of words and the beautiful delivery that Obama might have offered to it, and the way he tries to take the entire nation in his own confidence? So what can be an exemplary way to prepare ourselves for a beautiful speech or for public speaking than all these speech acts? Now, dramatic monologue I have already talked about, which is such a poem written in the form of a speech of an individual character, and it comprises the narrator's sense of his or her story. We have talked about that. The Victorian poet Robert Browning used it excessively, and my last touches and the lines of Porphyria's lover have already been shared with you. Now, let us try to make a difference between soliloquy and monologue. By now, you might have been able to understand the basic difference. While a soliloquy is given by a person with no audience on stage, fine, you could have seen that while Juliet was not there, Romeo was speaking. But when we talk about monologue, person delivers a speech to another or to the whole audience. In soliloquy, the only audience is the theatre watching the play or the audience members. But in monologue, the audience in the play as well as in the theatre. There is only one character in soliloquy, whereas there are more than one present in the monologue, as you have seen. Of course, they may not interrupt. In soliloquy, the character's innermost thoughts are expressed, whereas in monologue, the character speaks to express and not to engage in a conversation. So these are the basic differences. Now, there is the one last speech act which I am going to talk about. You might have found in many of the plays where the dramatist writes in brackets aside. So this aside is actually a literary and dramatic device which is used for acquainting the audience or preparing the audience with the character's thoughts. So you will find often people write in bracket, he shrieks, he smirks, he smiles. It's a common device used in literature and media and can provide essential context for scenes. Here we have taken some lines from again from Hamlet, where the king, the Claudius is the king now. Now my cousin Hamlet and so my son. And you will find what Hamlet says. And what Hamlet says is not heard by others, but only the readers or the audience knows. A little more than kin and less than kind. So at times it appears to be a bit epigrammatic. And the king says, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? Actually, the king does not know that Hamlet is in the midst of a different sort of thought. And then there is dialogue. You are all familiar with dialogues, which is between two parties, two people, fine. And in dialogue, two people keep on talking to each other. Sometimes the third may also enter. It is a literary or a dramatic composition. Here I have taken some lines from one of the beautiful plays by Girish Karnad's Tughlaq, where Tughlaq appears to be very helpless when he has moved his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, and there is only one person who knows Tughlaq's mind, and that person is Tughlaq's minister or the secretary, who is Barani. So Muhammad actually finds Barani reading a book, and Muhammad says, I couldn't bear the walls anymore. When I came here, I felt I needed an audience. Someone to confess my self-pity to you. You were asleep. And you know what Barani says? No, your majesty, I was reading a book by Imam Abu Hanifa. And you know the response that Tughlaq gives? Fortunate. You can read when you don't feel sleepy. I can't sleep. I can't read. Even Rumi, who once used to transport me, has become simply a web of words. Do you know, 5 years ago, I actually used to pray to God not to send me any sleep. I can't believe it now. So this is actually a sort of dialogue. So we have given the examples of aside, soliloquy, monologue and dialogue, and then we will find that in public speaking, activism is very important. And this activism is the practice of action, vigorous action, vigorous action. According to Webster, an activist is one who advocates or practices activism. here, if we take it in a different way, we find that all speakers become active when they speak. So, public speaking is an essential component of activism, which can be divided into 5 types. What are they? Demonstrations and protests, boycott, strikes, letter writing, petitions, social media campaigns. So, in all these you find a sort of activism, but then here I am trying to defend my line of thinking that public speaking is also a sort of activizing ourselves or activating ourselves, our own thoughts to be shared with other people. Now, you might be thinking, how are these related to public speaking? What are its importance? My dear friends, all these speech acts, they actually help a novice speaker boost one's confidence. It can also help in rehearsing, because before every presentation we have been saying that the speakers need to rehearse their talk, and it also helps in exposing a speaker to speak in different situations or on different occasions. Rather, through all these devices that we have used, a speaker can learn the effective use of language, and finally a speaker actually gets himself prepared to face varied audience groups to speak in different situations. I think with all these speech acts and the way they are to be implemented, I think all of you might be waiting, might be feeling very confident as to how, when you are going to speak, why you need it, and why you need it can be complemented and supplemented by one of the quotes by William Blake, a beautiful and symbolist poet, who says, "You never know what is enough." That is why you never know what is enough unless you know what is more than enough. What's the meaning? The meaning in this context is that as a speaker, you never know what is adequate, what is enough, unless you know what is more than enough. So, all these devices will actually help you distinguish between what is enough and what is more than enough, and will also provide you rooms to practice, to rehearse, and also to perfect your role as a public speaker when the opportunity so demands. I hope you might be feeling, or you might be gaining a lot of confidence with these lectures. And with this, we come to the end of this talk, and in the next talk we shall again continue with another lecture, where we shall be talking about something which actually goes to make you more confident than ever as a public speaker. Thank you very much. I wish you all a good day.